Hi everyone, welcome back to my page. In today's masterclass, we'll be talking about something that I've seen a lot of people DM me about and also comment in most of my posts talking about rejection sensitivity and specifically what it looks like when you're dating. So, I just want to give a pre-warning that this one's going to get a little technical, a little clinical in places because the research here is still pretty new, but I'm going to walk through it pretty carefully. So, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's do this. I always love starting my presentations with a why this matters page because I think it really helps set up the entire presentation and kind of gives you a roadmap as to why we're even discussing this topic. So, first, this experience is really common in the autistic community, but it doesn't get named very often. A lot of you have described rejection hitting way harder than it seems like it should without ever having language for why. Second, when rejection feels that overwhelming, dating itself can start to feel not worth the risk, and that's a real cost. Third, even healthcare providers tend to downplay how intense this is. And fourth, once something has a name, you can actually work with it instead of just trying like you're failing at something everyone else finds easy. You've probably seen the term rejection sensitivity dysphoria floating around, but I want to be upfront that is not a formal diagnosis. It started as language in ADHD spaces, and autism research hasn't pinned it down as its own distinct thing yet. What the research does show is that autistic adults consistently describe their reactions to rejection and criticism as overwhelming, exhausting, and hard to shake. And this isn't people exaggerating. Participants in this research tied it to a real combination of autistic traits and a lifetime of actual repeated rejection. Like I said on the last slide, the term rejection sensitivity dysphoria was built to describe an ADHD experience first. Autistic adults borrowed the language because it fits. And the overlap between autism and ADHD is bigger than most people think. One recent study followed adults diagnosed with ADHD and found that almost half of them also showed significant autistic traits. But to be honest, research generally can't separate the two yet. The scoping review behind this deck says directly that we don't know whether this kind of rejection sensitivity comes from autism specifically, from co occurring ADHD, or both. So, here are a couple examples as to when somebody could experience rejection sensitivity. So, first, a real pattern of rejection. Autistic adults face more social rejection over a lifetime than non autistic peers, so this sensitivity often reflects a real history and not a distortion. Second, intolerance of uncertainty. Autistic adults tend to respond more strongly to ambiguous situations, and dating is basically built out of ambiguity. Third, delayed affect labeling. Putting feelings into words can take longer, so the distress can show up after the moment that caused it, and that's still completely valid. And fourth, masking fatigue. Years of holding back your reaction to seem fine can make a real rejection feel unbearable once it finally gets through. So, how can this impact dating? This is what ordinary dating ambiguity looks like once it passes through a nervous system that's tuned to catch threat early. A flat or short text reads as evidence, not just someone being busy. A canceled plan can feel like proof of the whole thing was never real. A delayed reply gets filled with the most and worst possible explanation because silence doesn't come with a caption. And tone is generally hard to read over text, so uncertainty just defaults to threat. Not hearing back can feel identical to an actual no, and something as small as I need some space can land as a full rejection sometimes. When someone's nervous system reads an ambiguous text as a threat, from the outside that can look like overreacting to something small. When old rejection resurfaces because of a canceled plan, that can look like taking things more personally than the situation calls for. When distress is still building while waiting for a reply, that can look like being anxious or checking in too much. And when silence after asking a question feels indistinguishable from a no, that can look like assuming rejection before it's even confirmed. Now, none of this is a character flaw. It's a mismatch because what's happening internally and what's visible from the outside are two different things sometimes. I love creating visual representations of what we're discussing in these master classes. And so for this one, I wanted to create a little bit of a map that shows in the center a rejection sensitivity itself and branching out from it four different triggers. To begin with, ambiguity, where uncertainty registers as danger, but from outside it can read as jumping to conclusions. Second, past rejection, where old exclusion resurfaces in the moment, but from outside it can read as holding a grudge. Third, delayed processing, where the feeling shows up after the moment has passed, but from outside, it can read as a disproportionate reaction. Lastly, we have the masking fatigue, where suppressed reactions build until they break through, and from outside, that can look like it came out of nowhere. Though it's the same internal experience, they're very different. They're very differently read depending on which side of it you're standing on. So here are a couple common pitfalls and some reframes that I think that could be really beneficial when it comes to rejection. Their overreacting isn't the full story. The intensity is tied to real, repeated rejection and to traits like intolerance of uncertainty, and it's not exaggeration. Reassurance seeking isn't neediness. It's often a direct way of managing a well documented vulnerability to ambiguity. A delayed reaction isn't a fake one. If affect labeling takes longer to access, the feeling can show up late and still be entirely real. And lastly, naming this pattern isn't the whole fix. It's the starting point for building tools around it, and it's not a solution on its own. So let's get into some practical strategies that could really be beneficial. To begin with, we have practice affect labeling. Putting feelings into words, even roughly, is linked to lower anxiety around uncertainty. Now, next, we have name ambiguity as ambiguity. Separating I don't know yet from this is definitely rejection interrupts the jump straight to worst case scenario. Third, build in processing time. If your reaction runs on a delay, give it room to arrive instead of judging yourself for reacting late. And lastly, get support that actually names the pattern. A therapist who understands autism and ideally the ADHD overlap too can help you build specific tools to this instead of treating it as a generic anxiety. In closing, your reactions have a reason and you should believe it. You should believe in yourself, believe your body, believe your mind. And so if this presentation was helpful, please comment, share, like, give me some commentary on anything that you think that I should improve on or you think was interesting. If anybody wants the PDF version of this, please DM me because I'll definitely send that over. And I had a great time recording and researching this topic. So if anybody has any other topics that you would like for me to discuss on my page, please let me know. I hope everyone has an amazing day and see you soon. Bye.